Hello, everyone. Welcome. I would like to know how many of you learned anything this week? Excellent, excellent. How many of you met cool people doing astounding things with data? Some? Okay. How many of you met cool people doing business needs with data? Yes? Excellent. Great. Glad to see it's all represented. Well, we are going to continue that trend right now. And we are going to learn how to do more cool things with data, but we're going to do it very rapidly. So, what is better than 1 Zen? 2, right? So we're going to end your conference with a bang, and I am going to turn it over to Jeff and Luke, and they are going to blow your mind 2 minutes at a time. Everybody ready? Yeah? All right, let's give it up for 2-minute Tableau.
Thank you, everyone. You may have seen 50 tips in 50 minutes. The next year, I think we did 86 tips in 50 minutes. That's with my co-partner over there, Andy Kriebel. And then we topped it last year with 50 charts in 50 minutes, and Lorna and Ann Jackson took over the speed tips. So Luke and I got together, started thinking, well, what if we didn't do speed tips? What if we slowed it down a little bit and developed things over a 2-minute period of time? And so that's what we're going to do for you today. My name is Jeff Schaefer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Vice President of IT and Analytics at a company in Cincinnati, Ohio, and also adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati. I'm a 4-time Tableau Zen master and co-author of the Big Book of Dashboards.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to top him. He's done everything. I'm Luke Stanke. I am a founder and partner of an analytics consulting company. You know, when we do this at a high level, we just go off on our own and start a company and do this. I'm a 1-time Zen master and protege to Jeff, I guess, today. I'm going to just try to keep up as we go. And thanks for the applause earlier. It definitely is it's above what I expected for the very last session of conference. So first of all, thanks for coming out for the last session. We've made it. We're almost there. 1 hour to go.
All right, so what to expect today? We're going to do lots of different charts. We're going to try to bake in tips and tricks along the way. If you're new to Tableau, we'll try to have some beginner tips. If you're more advanced in Tableau, we'll try to cover some more advanced topics along the way. We'll point out that some of the things you see us do fast are really just a result of doing it all the time, so we would encourage you to practice as you build. Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, and all the other community projects. And then if time permits and technology works, we may phone a friend here. So, all right, so off to start. Do you understand Tableau? Question is, do you remember this movie? I don't know. It's The Matrix. Neo had a choice between 2 pills. I think it was blue and red. In Tableau, we have blue and green. We're going to talk about blue and green, especially as we dive into some of the things that we're going to do, maybe do a little data densification, and we'll talk about the blue and green pills and how those affect things. You're also not going to see Luke or I use Show Me.
Yeah.
I
I disabled my functionality on this, so it just doesn't work at all.
Okay, so he might use Show Me, I don't know. We don't use Show Me because we just don't find Show Me all that useful. I refer to Show Me as the pill pusher. It just moves pills around on the canvas, right? Blue pills and green pills kind of moves pills. We're going to move those pills manually, in some cases double-clicking to speed things up. Last but not least, we'll show you a little bit how that happens. This workbook will be on my Tableau public page, hopefully by the end of today, so you'll have all these slides. You don't have to take pictures or write any of this down.
Because neither of us were making edits right up here while everybody was walking in. That would never happen.
We may or may not have added slides in the last few minutes. All right, so to get started, I'm going to just start with some basic things. I've pre-formatted my workbook for some things, and I've left my workbook unformatted for others, just to kind of show you some tips or tricks along the way. So the first thing I'm going to do is work up a couple charts, all pretty quick, I think, and then we're going to put them on a dashboard and do some dashboard stuff. So real quick, I need a couple charts. This data set that I'm going to use for this one is just web analytics data. Happens to be website analytics from dataplusscience.com. The data set doesn't really matter. It could be any data set, but it's web analytics data. So I'm going to double-click Pageviews. That's going to put that on my rows, and I want to see those page views by some sort of date. So I'm going to double-click my date, and that's going to go to my columns. Now, I want to see this by day, so I'm going to go down and just change this to a day. I'm going to give it a continuous day, just so we have all of the web visits by day. So here's the first tip that I want to show you. This is one I use all the time. It's a very basic, super easy tip to use, but we want to format this y-axis. And so I'm going to right-click on that to format, to bring up our formatting menu. And in the number formatting on our axis scale, the tip or trick is that you want to use the custom formatting first. You're going to go to custom formatting and format the number how you would like it. I don't want any decimal places, for example, and I want to put that in units of 1,000. Once I've formatted this, then I'm going to click on custom, because it's going to populate this number formatting for me. It's going to put in the number sign and the 0 and all of that. But you're going to notice way down in the bottom of my chart down here, you're going to see that there is a 0K on my axis line. And oftentimes, I just want to get rid of that. So first simple thing I'm going to do is put a semicolon and a space, and that's going to disappear. So real quick tip or trick there. I'm also to clean up, I'm just going to double click this and take the word page views out and just get rid of it. So I have a super clean chart. I'm going to repeat that on a second chart here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, but this time I want to see things by day of week. So I'm going to double-click my page views again. I'm going to double-click my date. You'll see I'm building charts pretty fast here. This time, when I select my date, I'm going to go down to my date part here and choose the weekday. I want the day of week. And so there's my day of week, and I kind of pre-formatted some of this stuff on here, but the tip or trick on this is to get rid of some ink on your bar charts. Sometimes we have these large bar charts that fill up our dashboard. We can reduce that ink, which will, the eye draws to that. And so the tip here is I'm going to put a dark border on the chart, and I'm going to change the color of it to the background. And that'll give me a real clean bar chart that I can add on there. I think down here I pre-formatted something, so I'm going to have to, let me just fix my axis down here. This should be dark text and not blue text. There we go. And in this case, I'm just going to get rid of my header. That's chart number 2. Number 3, I'm building 4 charts for a dashboard here. Maybe I want to see what blog posts. So I've pre-grouped some of my blog posts into a topic. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that group that I did over to the rows just to see the group of blog posts that I have. I'm going to bring my page views up. I'm going to sort it real quick. And I'm going to add the label of page views. So there's another one real quick. In this case, I'm going to get rid of my axis again. There's my 3rd chart for my dashboard. Not much tips for that, but I needed a 3rd chart. 4th chart, we're going to do some mapping tips and tricks. So we're going to map some data. Now, the first thing that you may notice is over here I have city and country. They're not together. They were, but I took them apart. And I want to create a hierarchy. So I'm going to double-click or multi-select both of those pills. I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to create a hierarchy. Just go down, create a hierarchy. I'll call that location, and I have a hierarchy that quick. Unfortunately, city alphabetically is before country, so I need to flip them. So I'm just going to drag country up, and it'll go on top. Now they live together. When I double-click city, longitude will go to my columns, latitude will go to my rows, city is going to go to my details, and I get a map. Now, this map is not really useful yet because I don't have any data on it, so I'm going to put page views on size just to see what cities are getting the page views across the world. So the tips, I love this tip for mapping. It'll give you so many opportunities to make custom maps without going into Mapbox. So what do? We go up to map, we go to our map layers, we are going to uncheck the base layer, and I don't need land cover either, so I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to add coastlines. Now you say, well, that's kind of useful, but what did you do differently here? Well, by taking the base layer off, what I can then do is right-click on that, and I can format the map, and I go to shading, and I want to change the pane. And when I change the pane color of a map without a base layer, I can get whatever color of a map I want. And so that gives me a nice map. Now, you'll see I also have white lines in there and light lines. That's another interesting tip that you can do. You can go back to your layers, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you change your layer here to dark, it'll change those lines to dark. And so now I have a dark line with any color I want on my chart. The last step is, of course, build a dashboard. We've all watched as I double-clicked pills here to create a chart, but how many of you double-clicked to create a dashboard? I mean, can we do that? So I'm just going to find here, I call it 1 web, 2 web, 3 web, and 4, right? So double-click 1, 2, 3, 4. I have a 4-quadrant dashboard, that quick, in a tiled format, just with double-clicking. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then maybe I want a text box at the top. I'll just drop a text box on the top of it. I am going to, actually I should copy my text here so I don't have to type it. So I'll just copy this, and then I'll drop a text box up here at the top. I'll make it really big, because we like big titles, and I cannot lie. And about 4 people got that joke. That's great. Doesn't get much better than this, folks. So, those are the jokes today. We may have, better Tableau tips, but there we go. We have a finished dashboard with a title. I'd probably add a subtitle and some other things. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Luke.
All right, it's Friday. I'm going to lighten things up with some memes every time I transition back in from Jeff. But other than that, things are going to get real serious really quickly, and we're going to build some really serious business visualizations. Just as a heads up to the data set, hopefully everybody's familiar with it. If you're not, we're going to use the Superstore data for all these visualizations. It's basically digital sales for a retailer, and the sales come in daily from, in this case, I'm using January 1st, 2015, all the way through the end of 2018. And just as a reminder, it has data for 48 states and Washington, D.C., and several lines of business, which they call category and subcategory. So that's just going to set up the context of building these visualizations. That said, we're going to talk about how to build this dashboard. Well, actually take this dashboard and completely break it apart and do it completely different, because no one would ever make a dashboard that looks exactly like this, not ever in their workplace. And where we're going to start specifically is with when we zoom in and take a look at this chart. How many people, and be honest with me, have had to make a chart where they show the top and bottom performing parts of a business? Of course, it happens all the time. The one issue that happens when we build this is we create 2 visualizations where the bars look like they're the same length. However, this axis goes to 450,000, and this one goes to 5,000. So I'd have to do some funky adjusting of this chart, and it doesn't look very nice. Instead, what might be useful is if we brought all of those together onto a single visualization where we could see both the top and bottom without having to do a ton of formatting. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to build this chart. And if it looks intimidating, it's not really. What we're going to do is we're going to build 2 sets and 3 calculations, and 2 of them are going to be fairly straightforward. We're going to start by building a set right away, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to search for state in my data, right-click, and then go to create, and then set. And in fact, I'm not going to spend too much time building these, but I'm just going to say, hey, this is where you build a set. Hopefully everybody's learned this. But we're going to build a top set and a bottom set. When I'm on general, make sure that you are using all, and then going to top by field and building that out. Just to show you what those 2 will eventually look like is we will have, I lost one visualization along the way, but we'll have 2 sets that we're going to create, one for the top and one for the bottom. Once we have those, then we're going to create 2 calculations, and now my calculations are missing, so I'm going to fix that in a minute. But what we have here is a calculation that says if the states are in the top 10, then say top. If it's in the bottom, then show it in the bottom 10. Else, we're going to do these 2 little quotes. And for our second calculation, since it's not showing up, I'm going to go and actually build that calculation for us right now. I'm going to zoom in, Control, Shift, and zoom. And I'm just going to say if it's in the top, or state is in the bottom, then let's return the state name. Else, we're going to say other states. And I'm going to say end. So that's a pretty simple, 2 simple calculations that we've made and 2 sets. After we've built those 2 calculations, which I'm just going to cancel because I already have that saved, we can actually build that exact visualization. By the way, I just want to point out that this calculation, what it looks like is, That's also broken, which is no surprise. Okay. So what we end up now with is, you'll see we have Alabama, which is neither in the top or the bottom, so it's another state, and it is blank. If we look at California, it is in the top, and it is showing the state of California. We're going to build this visualization by taking my first calculation here and bringing this out onto my visualization. And you'll see this all looks the exact same, but as I pull this out and then pull state away, we'll now have a list of top, bottom, and all the others. Of course, we can always do manual sort. I'm just going to click and drag top to the top, and bottom is in the bottom, and then I have all my other states. Unfortunately, all my other states are not sorted, so I can just click on state here and then click the sort button, and it will sort that dimension for me. What you'll also see is I have this bar that's really long. It takes all the other states and it sums up sales for all the other states. So how can we get all other states to show up sort of in the middle of all those others? We can use the include function. The include function will include state in it, and we're going to do an inline calculation. What I'm going to do is double-click on sum of sales here on the columns shelf, and it's going to open up the ability to create a calculation inline. I'm just going to use the curly brace, the function include, state, and sum. So what this is going to do is it's going to return the sum of states by state. And the reason I'm using this calculation is because I don't have the state dimension any longer on my view. I'm going to hit OK, and you'll see that nothing is going to change. Well, I've already done the sum of states inside that level of detail calculation. If I do the sum of a sum, I'm just back to the same number. But if I change this from sum to average, then I have the bars that I'm looking for. Finally, we can just add a little bit of formatting. I'm going to sort of jump and cheat a little bit and say, oh, we add some formatting, add some color formatting, and we'd end up with that exact same visualization along the way. So that's our first chart that we've updated. We've taken 2 charts and actually made a single chart from it. The next chart, I bet no one's also made this chart ever, placed measure names and measure values on color and created this chart. But you know what the issue is we've got 3 different dimensions here. One is showing sum of sales, adding up to a very high number. Profit is both positive and negative, and then profit ratio is a percentage, and it's not a very large percentage. So we end up with just this gray box on color ratio. So what can we do to actually make this useful, or make the legends useful? Well, we can right-click on measure values on color. We can use separate legends. This way we have 3 separate legends. Once you have 3 separate legends, perfect. Now you can discern the values themselves. Except for one thing. When you use legends on a visualization, you probably shouldn't have 3 separate legends. You should probably just have one number that you're actually highlighting. In this case, I want to highlight profit ratio, and I don't really want to put color on any of the other values. There's one issue, though. When I'm using measure names and measure values on color, I can't go anywhere on my visualization to remove this legend. I have to do something else. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right into the color. I'm going to change my palette to custom diverging, and I'm going to set these colors to white. So when I set the value to white, and I set this other one to white, I bet you would never guess what's going to happen, especially when I use stepped color of 2. But it makes it into an all-white view. So it looks like there's no color formatting on it. I, of course, could do the same thing with the next one, but I'm going to save ourselves some time. And then, of course, I wanted to highlight profit ratio. So here I've just taken the time to take the next step and format the next 2 dimensions. My issue, though, here is when I'm building my tables is I don't like all this extra color. I only want to show just like a little bit of red, not like overdo it. I want to make it a little more subtle. So what I like to do is I like to use a function. It's a really simple function, and I call it 0. What is in 0? Well, if I edit it and I zoom in, if you can't see, it's just 0.0. And 0.0 is going to be a placeholder. And you can imagine, right, by adding 0.0, it's just a column now in my data that holds 0. I'm going to click and drag that out of my view, and I'm going to change this to a dimension. And once I have it as a dimension, you'll notice I now have a mark right in the middle. It's a little rectangle or a square, and I want to just make that a circle. But it's in the middle, and I don't like the fact that my values are kind of second fiddle to the actual mark itself. So what I'll do is I'm going to go down on my axis, and I'm going to edit the axis. I'm going to set this value to, through a lot of practice, by the way, set it to -1 and 0.2. That's going to get my values shifted off to the right, and then if I just move my labels over as well, I will have what looks like KPIs with a little bit of color off to the right of it. Finally, we can add a little bit of formatting to this to make it look nice. We all know this trick. We can just right-click and copy the formatting, and then we can bring that over and paste formatting. And of course, oops. Once we bring over that formatting, I'm going to paste it, and then I have my fully created visualization because I had the formatting already on another view. And that is where I'll leave you with the next bit. Jeff.
All right, so for the next section, I'm going to take us from simple map tricks and basic dashboard tricks to what's next? Data densification, why not? So we're going to jump from the very simple to the very complex. This is a very complicated topic, and I'm going to try to keep this simple for what I'm going to at least show you today. I would not be standing here talking about data densification if it weren't for some people that have come before me. So the first person I want to talk about is one of the original Tableau Zen masters. He wrote blogs and things on the forums and talked about webinars and things. There's a 2014 video that's 5 years old where he is talking about some of the things I'm still talking about today. So that would be Joe Mako. And yeah, big round of applause for Joe. And the second person that I have to mention, if you missed his session at the Tableau conference, he's also equally talented, has written more about data densification than anybody on the planet. His blog posts are still valuable today, even things that he wrote as early as 2012 and 2014. If you missed his session at conference, this would be the session to check out on a recorded session, and that would be Jonathan Drummey. So. Thank you, Jonathan. There's lots of other folks that have taught on this. Jonathan has a slide of about 40 or 50 people in his presentation that have all done these topics. So shout out to all of those. Too many to name up here. So a couple concepts I'm really using Joe's terms for most of these things. They talk about sparse data. What is sparse data? Sparse data is where it's not completely filled in. You'll notice on the left-hand side, I have a number and it's sort of missing. On the right-hand side, I have dates, but they're not complete dates. I go from November 3rd to November 14th to November 27th. And so that's one concept that really you need or often need data densification to solve. One of the methods for data densification is domain completion. That's where you'll see on the left-hand side, I'm just using subcategory and category, and there's a whole bunch of missing ABCs. They're not there. And so how do we get those there? And domain completion happens when there's two blue pills opposing each other. You'll see on the rows and columns, they're against each other. And I use one of the most magical functions in Tableau, which is the index function. We use that a lot, and that'll turn on data densification. In this case, it'll complete the domain, and you'll get the ABCs. The second concept that you're going to see is domain padding. Domain padding is different in the sense that you have what Joe refers to as a range-aware pill, a pill that has some sort of range. And he doesn't say date, because it also works with bins. So a bin or a date, you could start at 1 and go to 100 in a bin, and you can densify inside of that. Or you could have November 3rd and November 14th, and you can densify in that. Now, you'll see at the top, I did just weekdays by category. You'll see the ABCs, just 1, 2, 3, and then there's no 4th of the month or 5th of the month. It's missing. And then down at the bottom, you'll see that there's a couple different techniques, show missing values, and all of a sudden I have these values that I didn't have before. So those are the concepts that we're going to talk about here. Kevin Flairledge has a great post that he did, Ken Flairledge, excuse me, boy, Kevin works for me and I'm still mixing them up. Ken Flairledge has a great post on data scaffolding, and he solves this particular problem that was asked on the forums, this problem right here, where somebody simply wants to add 0% in all of those, in that table, in all those values where it doesn't exist. And he talks about how to do it with Tableau by bringing in dates for every day of the year, and he does that with Tableau Adjoin, and he does that through Prep. So great blog post, definitely check it out. However, I'm going to do that same thing, and we're going to do it without data scaffolding. So let's figure out a couple other ways that we can do this. And there's many different ways to do this, and scaffolding is certainly one way, but let's do data densification. So I'm missing values here. You'll see that I have two blue pills that are opposing up there, customer name against a month. So there's a couple different things I could do with this. Let me do I guess the more complicated way, maybe, a couple different steps here. I'm going to do an inline formula on my marks card like Luke did. Double click on there. I'm just going to type index, open paren, and close paren. So just index, I'm just typing it right there on my marks shelf, and that'll give me an index. I'm going to click the little icon on it, and when I click the icon, I'm going to put that to label so that you'll see the index. Now you'll see the index turned on data densification. When I put it on label, it showed it. What does index do? It just counts from 1 to 12 across. So I have all the points I need. I just need to make all those numbers 0 except for when there's a value, right? So I'm going to create a calculation, just a quick calculation that does what? And so here's my calculation. I'm going to say when the profit null, right, if that's false, then I want to use profit ratio. So if profit ratio exists, I want to use it. Otherwise, I'm going to use that index, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what am I going to do? I'm going to subtract index from index. 5 minus 5 is 0. 4 minus 4 is 0. 3 minus 3 is 0, right? So I get 0. And that calculation right there, I can put that on the label instead of index. And what do I get? I get a bunch of zeros, and I get the value when the value is there. So you'll see the 13% that I'm trying to get is 12.5. The rest of them are 0. So in that case, now I can take the profit ratio off. I can format this pill to a simple percent. Again, these tips are pretty easy. The concept's a little more difficult, right? So we'll just do 0 as a percentage with 0 decimal places, and now I have all the zeros that I want in my table without scaffolding any data to this, without doing a union. I just turned on data densification. Okay. Let's do it another way. Maybe I can do it a different way without even doing that index calculation and doing an index minus an index. Well, another way to turn on densification that's even easier is we can go up to the pill, over here on profit ratio. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong pill. Month, thank you, month. So I'll go up to month up here, and I'm going to click on Show Missing Values. That's that highlight that I pulled out in that slide for you, and I'm just going to turn on that value of Show Missing Values. So we're going to click that, and you'll go, well, wait a minute, Jeff, nothing happened. There's no missing values there. Well, I didn't tell Tableau what to put in that field. So what you do is you go to the profit pill over here, go to Format, and right down at the bottom, you'll see where it says Special Values. And that is where I'm going to put my missing value. It's blank right now, and I'm simply going to put in here 0%. Now, when I do that, you'll say, well, wait a minute, Jeff, that didn't work either. Like nothing's coming up in here, like nothing's showing up. Well, let's use that magic function I told you about. Let's go up here and add that index function so that it turns on data densification. Remember, the index function is going to turn on that data densification. I don't have to do index minus index. Whatever's in that value, that text box is going to show up, like TC19, right? So there's how we can do that without doing an index minus index. All right, so let's bring this into a practical application. Let's build a calendar and see if we can apply these concepts to a calendar. So we're gonna use Superstore data here. I'm just gonna widen this up, make sure I'm using Superstore 2019. I'm gonna put order date on our columns I'm sure most of you know this with your Control key or your Command key. You can duplicate pills next to each other for fast. So I'm going to do year, and inside of year, I'm going to do weekday. Great. I'm going to duplicate it again down here, and I need a month. I'm going to go down and build month. So there's our month. I'm going to duplicate the pill one more time because we need weeks inside of months. So I'm going to go to week number. And what do you see? You see a bunch of ABCs, just like we had in our table example from Ken's blog post. So what can we do here? Well, I guess just to get rid of ABCs, let's just put a day in there. So I'm going to move order date over to text. You'll see that it has year in here. Now, before I change this to day, because I want the first of the month and the second of the month and the third of the month, I'm going to go up here and just pick one of these date pills and show the missing values like I did before. And you might say, hey, that right there solved our problem. We have values everywhere. And it's true. There is a year everywhere. And if you take that down to a month, there is a month everywhere. And if you take it down to a week, there is probably a week everywhere. The problem is if you go down to day, there isn't a day everywhere. And so we're back to the same problem that I'm now missing January 17th. I'm missing January 24th. I could do the same thing I did before. I could apply the special index function, right? That magic function. So let's try that. I'll go in here, index. We'll type that. You'll say, well, wait a minute, nothing happened. Well, that's because in this case, I have to tell the index how to count. I have to tell it what order to count in. So I'm going to go in here and set it to compute using the order date, and you'll see it filled in. So now I have all of those dates. So this is great, but now I may want to take it a step further here. I may want to build a calendar table out. So I went ahead and just kind of did that for you just to save some time. But this is really to kind of show you what it's doing. It's those missing values in there throughout the period that it's counting, right? It's filling in for us. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Luke while he's getting set up here. Let me switch the box here.
Oh, Jeff, those table calculations are a little bit magical, aren't they? Lots of practice, sleight of hand, and they just do the trick. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit more with table calculations to see if we can really make them work. What we're going to do is we're going to build this visualization you see up here. It just has 3 table calculations. And what you'll notice about it that I want to point out is that we have month-over-month calculation, and we have a year-over-year calculation, and then we have that for all of 2018. Should seem fairly straightforward. This is should be a pretty simple table to build. However, I want to show you why it's not as easy as it looks, but doesn't take much to fix. So we're just going to start with all the years of data in that same data set. We've got category on rows, and we've got by month and year on columns. And if I were to do a table calculation, a simple month-over-month table calculation, I can just click the drop-down, go down to Quick Table Calculation, and choose percent difference. When I choose percent difference, sure enough, I get a month-over-month difference. And the reason I know there's a month-over-month difference is if you look at January 2015, there is no data for that month. This is not a surprise. We've all done this calculation before. And in fact, when we've done this calculation before and we filter to the year that we're looking for, 2018, what happens? No data in January for 2018. So I now don't have any data to actually compare to that January 2018. So how do I fill that in with information? Well, it requires a little bit of work, but we're actually going to build out first before that. I just want to set up the problem a little bit. What we want to do first is build our year-over-year calculation. And to build that year-over-year calculation, it's not too difficult. We just need to manipulate our existing table calculation. And there's a couple of things that we can do with our table calculation as is. We definitely want to save this out. So I could just click and drag this over to Measures and Release, and I could save that calculation out. I'm not going to do it that way because that's just not the way that I personally like to do it. I like to create a new calculation, click Calculated Field, and then click and drag that value into the box, and it'll bring in the whole table calculation. I'm just going to name this Sales Month Over Month. We'll remember that for later. I'm just going to hit Apply, and I don't have that calculation, so that's perfect. And then I'm going to build another calculation straight off of this. I'm just going to right-click, duplicate, and I'm going to build my year over year from this as well. Just right-click, edit, and you'll see my calculation. You'll notice the -1. That's saying look up, go back one value. It's a nice function that Tableau has provided, the lookup function. I'm just going to change these values from -1, representing go back 1 month, to -12. And when I do this, I now have my, instead of month over month value, my year over year. I'm just going to hit OK there as well. So I've got my table calculations, but I still have not solved my problem. So we're going to build out this visualization. Let's start by, how I personally do this is I'm just going to take sales and I'm going to search for it. I could bring out each value one at a time, but the easy way to do that, I want to do this, is with measure names and measure values. I'm just going to take measure names, drag it out on rows, and it shows up on my visualization as no measure showing. I'm also just going to take measure names and add this to filters. And this works really well, by the way, when you've got a long, long list of measures. And you're like, I don't want to have all my measures show up in my dropdown. I only want to select what I want right away. So I'm just going to unselect this, and I'm going to say, let's show sales month over month, and year over year, and hit OK. Nothing changed, nothing showed up, because it won't adjust on my visualization until I click and drag measure values onto text. So there it is. I've now brought those in without getting my really, really long list. I'm going to do another thing that I like to do right away. You'll notice my percentages, they're whole numbers. And I really want those to be percentages. Well, we can format those from the get-go right away. And the way we can format those is to do multi-select. So I'm just going to hold down Control, multi-select, choose the drop-down, go to Default Properties, Number Format, Percentage, 0 decimals, and then Tableau will override my visualization and bring that formatting in. There's one other thing that I really like to do is you'll notice that on my visualization here, I want to skip ahead to this one. You'll notice that I have month over month and year over year showing. It's the same labels. Well, I want to edit the alias of this, and what I want to do is I like to bring in some little characters, some additional characters to help with the formatting. So what I'm going to do, hit OK, bring that in, right-click, edit alias, paste that in, and say month over month. And hit OK. And I've edited that alias. I already have one that exists like that. So if this ever happens, which I'm sure you know, just add a nice little space after it, and we won't have any issues. Hopefully that's the best tip you walk away with. Oh, I just added a space. And I could do the same for the other one. I'm not going to spend time doing it. I'm just going to add that formatting in for color right away too. And now you'll see that I have like a little, all right, here's my sales, and then here's the context of month over month, and here's the context of year over year. Finally, we've gotten to the point where we need to figure out how to do this. How do we do this? How do we get rid of this blank value? I'm going to show you a little trick on how to do this, but I'm going to set it up first by using an inline calculation of the last function. And the last function does the same thing that Jeff showed with index, except it counts from the number of spots from the last dimension. From the last dimension. So we have 0 on December, and we know that the end of the year is always going to be 11. So I could just create a simple calculation that says, if it's less than 12, show it, otherwise let's hide it. Oh, this seems like it's going to be pretty crazy. It's just that really simple calculation. I'm just going to search for it, show, hide, click and drag that value out on my view, and you'll notice that now that value is there. It says show, and of course, if I go back far enough, it shows hide. Well, all you need to do to keep that calculation is to right-click on hide. I'm kind of giving the secret away, is then hide that value. It's still on my view, but it's now hidden, and you'll see that January has those values. I'm going to get rid of last here. But all I now need to do is right-click and click Uncheck Show Header, and now we have those values brought in. And take a look, January now has that blank value brought in, so I have a full table of data where I don't have to sort of cheat and never see that one month. Sure. Since I got sometimes I get an extra moment, I'm going to show you this calculation. It doesn't really mean anything because we're going to talk about it as a preview for my next section before Jeff comes up here. This calculation returns complete months, so maybe I want to just clean it up a little bit more, and I would say, all right, let's bring and drag and drop that on my view. And if I were to say be in, on the 15th, except this is 2018 in my data, if on the 15th I don't want to see November because it's not a complete month and I don't like to report until I have complete months. Well, now I have this dynamic calculation. No matter what I bring in here, and if I would change my date, it would show the most recent 12 months of data. So it's a rolling 12 months. Again, I'm going to show more about that calculation in a moment.
Thank you, Luke. Hello, hello. Thank you, Luke. I don't know if you heard the story, but Luke was actually kicked out of the casino at the roulette table last night because he got in a heated discussion with the roulette table about what he considers to be an odd number. So I don't know if he'll be back there today. So Luke was doing a filter on the measure names there. Let me kick this over. I had another thought, and we were doing this in our rehearsal. I kind of do that one in a different way. So I'm going to just use the Superstore data really quickly here and just go up. Let me undo all of these so that we have what I need. Let's see. Let's do category, subcategory. We've all done that before, and we'll pick a couple measures. I'll just take sales. Well, what if we want to create multiple columns? Doesn't matter what's in there, but let's just say I want to add quantity or rank. I could do what Luke was doing with the page filters, but another way I could also do it is just take quantity, drag it right on top of the table, and that will now be measure names automatically with my 2 pills instead of starting with all of them and working my way backwards. So now I have the 2 in there, and if I want to add profit ratio, I can drag it in the table and kind of work my way up. So just another shortcut, I guess, to do that. So let's go back to our calendar and let's talk about this a little bit. First, there's no data in this. We're going to put some data in it. So maybe I'll just do profit ratio. Let's put profit ratio on color. That's going to change the text, and I'm going to change my mark to square. So that's looking like a more useful calendar. However, even though I turned on data densification and I filled in all of the dates, it's not missing any dates. What you'll notice is because we're using padding, it only is going to start at the first date in your data set, and it's only going to end at the last date in your data set. I can't pad before a date that doesn't exist. So this data set starts at January 3rd in 2016, and then way over here in 2019 at the very end, you'll see that it ends on December 30th. So I'm missing the last calendar day and the first 2 calendar days. So this is an interesting problem. One way we could do this is go back to Ken's blog. We could talk about data scaffolding. We could join up all the real dates, and we'd have a date for everything. But let's see if we can do this in another way. So what I'm going to do is build a top-level calendar. That's what we just did. So that's exactly what you just saw. So that's a calendar that's going to go on top with my data. And then I'm going to build a calendar underneath it that has all of the dates. It's really interesting that I was working on this exactly the same time, prep for a conference, and then Ann Jackson did a great Workout Wednesday a couple weeks ago and did the same technique. So check out that Workout Wednesday if you haven't seen it. So let's do something similar here. What is the trick to get these in here? Well, the trick is that you're going to offset it with this other calculation. You're going to basically create a different date in the data set. So I called that date min-max date. And it's not really that magical. It just simply says if the order date is the minimum date in the data, then we're going to make that date the first of the month, right? January 1st. And if that date is the last date in the data, then we're going to make that month December 31st. So January 3rd, that first date, I'm going to move it to the 1st, and December 30th, I'm going to move it one day to the 31st. What that then lets me do, and this is just a table showing that, and I'll put them side by side, is that the real order date is January 3rd, the min-max date is January 1st. And we're not going to use that date for any data, so you don't have to worry about what the actual profit ratio, because that's really not the profit ratio for the first of the year. But now we have the first of the date, and we have the last date for the full calendar year in the data. So now I can build out another calendar view that I'm just going to call the base. And my base is going to build out a calendar. I'm not going to repeat the steps because it's the exact same steps I did before, but instead of using order date, I'm going to use the min-max date. I have the min-max year, the min-max weekday, and then when I turn on data densification, what happens? Well, I get everything filled in from the first to the second to the third and so on. So now I have a full calendar from January 1st all the way down to December 31st. And then what's the magic of that? Well, now that you have a base and you have a top, you can layer them in Tableau, put them on your dashboard, make the top layer a transparent worksheet, and you can have 2 on 1, right? So now they're together. There's no scaffolding required. I didn't step out of this data set at all. And just to kind of show you here, I can actually check this here. I'll just get rid of this one. There's the first layer, and then the second layer on top of it with the data. So we can see that it's just really one on top of the next. So that's finishing up the calendar there. With that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Luke.
That's impressive. I like that. Now we're going to talk about simple KPIs, and I'm going to show this meme because it's definitely, well, when we create KPIs, a great KPI often has a lot of backbone and structure that goes into it with additional calculations. And Jeff and I had a long debate whether I should share this because, KPIs, they're so simple, but they do take a lot of work, and we all use them every day. And in fact, when we make them, we often make them, the old-fashioned way, once again, using the old measure names, measure values. But the thing with this setup, when you use measure names and measure values, you end up with not being able to control the space around your value. Of course, you can put measure values also, or measure names also on text, but you still end up with a tooltip that is one value that you can't control for each of the KPIs. So instead, what I want to do is walk us through how to build this KPI that you see here. And in fact, what's nice about the KPI that we're going to go about showing is that as I change the date in my data source and it updates, it does do the dynamic shifting and rolling of the data to the most recent month in the data set. So what's nice about this KPI, by the way that I've set this up is there's also contextual data included in here. If you're in the back, it may be difficult to see, but you are able to see the year-over-year or the month-over-month change to go with this visualization. So you're getting more context within the KPI. How do they look side by side? Well, you can see one thing that's interesting is that as we add more space between these in our dashboard, we again are not controlling the height on the top one, but on our new KPI, it's much more controlled and easier to understand. And how do I do this? Well, I go back to using my trick with zeros. In this case, I'm just going to create an inline 0 and a couple of them by double-clicking and typing min 0.0. And that just centers the values, and it creates an additional marks card. And for every marks card we have, we can control the dimensions on that view, the measures on that view. But we're going to start by building out of all this in the KPIs using my favorite calculation. I believe this is absolutely the greatest calculation of all time. I'm not joking or being sarcastic when I say that. That this calculation is the greatest because it always returns the max date in the data set. And if you've mastered dates and you know how to do this, you can figure out any date in your entire data set and build out any KPI the way that you want. Most recent month, 5 months, year to date, you name it, you can use it with this calculation. From there, I always like to build this calculation. I understand that this calculation looks complicated, so let me break this down. This calculation will always, no matter what, return the last date of the most recent month. And the way it's done is that we take, again, that max order date, the maximum value in our data set, and we just add 1. So if you could imagine, let's imagine 2 different scenarios that we're playing out. We've got 2 different dates we're working with. We've got some date in the middle of January, and then we've got February 28th that we're working with, non-leap year, in our data set. That middle section, first what it's going to do is just going to add a date, so max date plus 1, and then the date trunc function is going to bring it back to the start of the most recent month. If we're at the +1 in March, it's just going to stay on that particular date. And then finally, we're going to subtract 1. And no matter what, it will always return the last date of the last full month. And guess what? In reporting world, this is exactly what we need to often return, sort of skip all the stuff that we're in the middle of the month of. And then ultimately using that function, oh man, Luke, you've got another crazy calculation here. What is exactly going on? Well, we're going to use that calculation to calculate the most recent month. So you can see in the timeline, we're taking reporting date, which is the end of the month, and then truncating it to the most recent month to get all that time period in between. That's returning the current month. We're then creating another calculation that returns the prior month. And finally, I'm going to do another one that I always just include for the sake of it, which is the prior year, same time period. We use all these calculations to create our KPIs. The first KPI that we're going to create is this top calculation, which is just saying if it's in that reporting period, in the most current period, return the sales. Again, I told you, remember the meme. This is exactly where we're going. Got people's heads going like this, which tells me there's lots of processing going on. Once we have that, we have our current calculation, we've got our prior calculation, and of course, from there, we're done. We have our main KPIs, but no, I also decided I wanted to show the difference. So of course, I had to create a difference calculation. And then because I like two different colored arrows, I create two different calculations, one with an arrow up, one is positive, one arrow when it's down. And all those calculations go in, all 11 calculations go to creating one very simple looking KPI. I know it's a lot of work to get there, but it is completely automated when we do this. So when we go to build our sales calculation, we just type in sales, and I'd bring in my current value, my delta, my down and up arrow. I add that to text, and then I have all my values in there, and then I just do a little bit of formatting by clicking on text, 3 dots, and then formatting these values. Of course, I'm going to take my arrow values and put them all in the same row. I'm going to take my delta value and put it behind it, and then I will also just do some quick formatting of the up arrow to be whatever color I feel like, and Jeff, I'm going to break some rules and choose blue, and then put my down arrow and make that red. Once I have those done, I'm going to take my sales value, because it is my KPI, make it really nice and big on this line. Let's do like size 20. And then, of course, I like to label this, so I'm just going to call it sales and change the color quick. From there, we have created our KPI for sales. So that's all it takes. I know it's a little bit crazy, but that is exactly how I do KPIs every single day. I do this every day.
Thank you, Luke. We're going to do a couple fast ones here. I guess just to kind of finish up. One I thought that I would put in here. Let me jump over. Whoops. Is this chart here. So I think this popped up on Twitter. This is if you go to Pluralsight's a great site for video training, technology training, and so on. I guess the disclaimer I should say is I said it's a great site, but I own stock, so don't buy it. Don't go to Pluralsight on my account. But anyway, this chart is what they show you when you take the exam, I guess, on their website. You can take tests, and it shows you the proficiency. And somebody asked on Twitter, hey, great chart, can we build that in Tableau? And so, sure. The left side is a stacked bar. That's easy. I guess it's the main chart that kind of makes you wonder. Why is that interesting? Well, there's 3 marks there, right? There's an area chart at the bottom. There's a line chart on top of it, and then there's a shape. And if anybody is familiar with Tableau, we can't get 3 marks on a single chart, right? We can do a dual access, but there's no triple access. Any Tableau people in here? There's no triple access or any more. We'd like more of those. Any Tableau people? Yeah. So we only have 2 to work with today. So sometimes we have to trick Tableau into getting things that we like. So how do we get an area chart, a line chart in a different color there, and a shape on here? So with this one, I'll just kind of give you the answer. The answer is it's really not a line chart. So what did we do? We faked a line by doing a stacked area. And the top line is really just the top of the stacked area. So all I did here was simply create a calculation to put on the top of it. You'll see I have this dot position here. That's where my dot is. And then I have a bottom stack, and I have a top stack. So let's go look at that skill, I guess, top stack. That's the bottom stack. Here's the top stack. So we'll just look and see. Not really a big fancy calculation, is it, right? So if the person, that's the shape, is null, then we're going to add a 1. That's it. right? So where that shape is, we're not going to add a line. We're not going to add a value of 1. But where that shape isn't, we're going to put a 1. So what that means is I'm basically putting something on top. Let's say else 10 and see what happens to our chart. I'll just move this up to the top, and you'll see, hey, if it's 10, I'm adding 10 on the top. And if it's a 2, I'm adding a 2 on the top. So all I simply did here is create a stacked area, and then I used the measure names and measure values to trick the color. I made the one bottom part of the area chart a darker color, and the top line, which is the stacked top, a brighter color. And so that's the tip or trick on that one for you. Sometimes you just have to get a little creative when you want to work with your marks. You can use those measure names and measure values to do that quite often. You can do lots of different tricks with that. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
That was awesome. So we're almost to the end, but we have another tip. You know how I said, oh, let's remember the month over month or the mom calculation? It's my mom's birthday today, so what we should do is call her in Tableau. You can do that if you didn't know. In fact, just quickly, not only can you do that, ignore my desktop. That's why my images weren't showing up earlier. I didn't have all the images on there that I took for screenshots and whatnot for this. You can send emails via Tableau. You just have to have a link. I have this one dashboard I created, and it's on Tableau Public, and you'll see you can quickly fill in an email if you automate the fields for it, or you can make a call, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call my mom in Tableau. So I'm just going to, by the way, practical application, right? It's always important. You've got a call, or like your salesperson wants to get a hold of someone, so they want to see the number, so then you'd like call straight from it, and it's on your mobile. So here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to call my mom. I've already loaded in her phone number, so no one gets her phone number and calls and says hi to her as well. We'll do it all together once. I'm just going to go to Worksheet. I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to say, oh, I already added it, but that's all right. I'll show you what it looks like. It's just TEL and semicolon, and then the calculated field of phone number. So it's that simple. By the way, I'm going to have it as a select action on a URL action. I'm going to hit OK. And once I hit OK, I tried this earlier. The audio didn't go through, so we're going to call, and then I'm going to switch it over. I'll show you. So it's right here. My wife's wishing me luck on my presentation right now. And then I can just hit call, and then it's going to, oh, there we go. Is it going to call through? It is. There it is. Oh, it's calling through. I'm just going to switch it over to speaker.
Hello?
Hey, Mom.
Hi.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
So everybody else wishes you happy birthday as well, I believe.
Well, thank everyone else for me.
Oh, you just did. Bye, Mom. We'll talk to you later. That said, we want to wrap things up, and we do have a little housekeeping. Of course, you're finishing up. This is it. We were told after the session to go outside and take questions out there, but it's the end, so everybody can just come up if you have questions, or we have talk to Jeff or I. And of course, don't forget to score us all 5s, because we're awesome. Just as awesome as everybody else. Everybody gets all 5s today. Thank you.
Right.